Good morning, Aurora. Good morning, Aurora. Good morning, Aurora. The time is 9:01 a.m. You are listening to and watching Good Morning, Aurora, the second largest city's first daily news podcast. It's Tuesday morning, and we have a brand new guest on our program this morning. My guest today is Andrew Sosnowski, professor at Aurora University and also candidate for Kane County State's Attorney. How are you today?
Good morning, Curtis, and good morning, Aurora. Buenos dias, Aurora. Sí, hablo español también, sí.
Good. That's awesome. So how are things going for you this Tuesday morning?
Well, it's going great.
Okay.
Thank you for asking, Curtis. The campaign is underway. I mean, it's almost done. We have a week left, and we've been out everywhere. You know, my team has been from north to south, east to west, reaching voters and trying to talk with them and find out what's the concerns they have about the county. And that's what we're all about, listening to the voters, listening to individuals, making sure that they have a voice.
Okay. So you're the Republican candidate for
Yes.
Kane County State's Attorney. What has the in this journey, when you knock on those doors and you get that feedback from folks, what's the what's the number one issue they tell you about? That's the number one thing that you hear?
Safety.
Okay.
You know, there's concerns as I go in neighborhoods. I've been in neighborhoods that are more inner city neighborhoods, and I've been in areas that are rural. And it's the same mantra everywhere, which is safety of our communities and keeping us safe, prosecuting cases that are violent crimes, and making sure that the voices of all people are heard. Those are the things I hear the most. And to be honest with you, I'm getting a lot of good reaction from people. I've been going to a lot of independent homes. I look at myself as independent, although I'm a Republican candidate. I've always been moderate. I'm not a red or blue guy. You know, if you say, oh my gosh, he's red or blue, I'm more about the people, and I really listen to people. And I've been going to those doors, and they have a huge ear, and they have a huge voice.
Right. Kane County's not that unsafe, though. Safety, there's not a lot of crime in Kane County. Aurora's at a resurgence now in regards to people coming out and having a good time. I think some would call it a renaissance, with people enjoying being out and going to those places, parks and waterways. Are there hot spots?
Yeah, you know, Curtis, I'm not sure I completely agree that that safety is reigning here in Kane County. We're seeing a lot of pockets in Elgin and Aurora where crime is growing. And it starts very, very mildly. You don't even realize it. With the new laws we have, sometimes you begin to see just an undercurrent of things, and then it starts growing. You know, I remember back in the 90s, and again, going to what you said, that crime is really low here, it depends on who's giving you the statistics. You know, when you have elected officials or politicians giving you statistics, sometimes they're not going to be the truth because they want to get reelected, honestly. You know, you look at the Safety Act, which we'll probably talk about. McHenry County, which is our neighbor to the north, just came out with, he's not running for reelection. He came out with a horrible statistics about how bad the Safety Act is causing damages. That's the state's attorney in McHenry County. The McHenry County State's Attorney came out with an article, and it was really, really telling. And that's what's happening, I believe, in Kane County. Very, very, gradually it's starting to grow. I ask people all the time, what are you seeing in your neighborhoods? They say, well, I'm hearing more gunshots. I'm seeing more gangs starting to come back. And these are people in Elgin and Aurora. Those are hot spots. Carpentersville's another hot spot. I talk to law enforcement there, and they tell me the same thing. They say they see starting to grow criminal activity. And I say, well, what do you think is the reason for these things? And they say consequences are not there.
Okay. What consequences specifically?
Well, holding people accountable for criminal activity is really important.
And this is I believe, for a lot of communities and probably law enforcement personnel, I think this is kind of where the rubber meets the road with it, because, for example, one of the things about the Safety Act is people deplore the lack of cash as bail. But judges still have discretion to keep people locked up. That hasn't been lost. So despite what may be going on, people are still being held accountable. Are you saying that there's not accountability for that? There's a lack of consequences? Because I haven't seen that.
Okay,
I haven't seen the
okay.
lack of consequences.
Sure. Let me give you an example that just happened 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago in Elgin, and 2 weeks ago in Kane County. It started in Aurora, it went to St. Charles, and then into Kane and into Elgin. A young man, probably 22, 23 years old, was arrested for domestic battery, and it was a violent act. He went before a judge. He went with the state's attorney. They had issues that he had gang violence, but that wasn't brought up to the court. And he was caught and released back into the community with no bond, with very little conditions, and very little watching what's going on. The young man then went to St. Charles, and he beat a young man who's 13 years old who was in a park playing ball. He beat him, violently beat him. He was arrested again. And the same policies that are there now, the same court system we have, the same laws that we had, caught him and released him again. It was a violent act.
Is that a failure of the chief prosecutor, or is that a failure of the judicial, the judge?
Curtis, that's a very good question. And my statement is this: the prosecutor's office has unfettered discretion in lots of situations. The way you charge something, the evidence that you put before the court, the information. And the judges are only as good as the information that's brought before them. And you can dissect that situation. And as I talk to the system, nobody wants to make a statement because everybody wants to stay in the shadows on some of that. But there were a lot of errors in that. So what happened after that? The young man got out a second time now, strike two, and he goes to Elgin. He goes to a quiet residential neighborhood in Elgin that has some crime growing. I was just out there. I had a conference out there with all the neighborhood. They came out to talk to me, and we did it 1 week after this incident took place. But a black man in Elgin was stabbed to death by this individual. And he was stabbed many times in broad daylight at 12:30 in the afternoon in a residential area. That's what's happening. That's the growth that we see in the criminal justice system, of violent crime. And let's look at the young man who did this. I'm not saying that everyone should be locked up and people say, you're all for law and order. I'm for law and order. And I'm for consequences for behavior that are fair and just. And that doesn't mean you're going to lock them up and throw away the key for life. But we have to have something that's going to assist and help these individuals. My opponent likes to talk about programs that they have, but there's not a lot of statistical data to show these programs are working. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of recidivism that's not reported. Well,
they release an annual report.
The annual report does not have the devil's in the details, Curtis. It's an 8x10 glossy. It's a very nice looking document. But if you get to the minutia of the details, some of these programs are not working, and we need to do a deep dive into understanding that. Now, as a professor at Aurora University, a senior lecturer at Aurora University, a 24-year veteran teacher or professor at Elgin Community College, we look into these things. There's ways of evaluating whether programs work or not. As your next Kane County State's Attorney, I'm going to look at these programs and do a deep dive into see what works and what doesn't work. We want things that work.
Which programs are you skeptical of?
I'm skeptical of the programs that, like, for example, the deflection programs. Some of those are not working.
What's that for the listeners who may not be familiar?
The deflection programs are the ones that where an individual's arrested and released without charges.
An individual's arrested and released without charges. I think there's. So, have you seen reoffense by those individuals?
Yes.
Is there?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's been a lot of recidivism, which is reoffending. And it's growing,
Why?
And then coupling that, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but coupling that also with the Safety Act, which now releases a lot of the individuals, it begins this trend which we don't want to see. And
But
again,
that's a judge's discretion.
it's not totally a judge's discretion.
If a person comes before court, that judge has the opportunity to lock them up or release them, taking into account their, lack of criminal history, if there is one, and things like that, and other circumstances, and probably a focus more to the detraction of a lot of people on substance abuse and things like that. Many different things.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like under a Sosnowski state's administration, there wouldn't be a Safety Act.
Well, that's a good question. But let me just, I'm going to tell you about that in a second.
Yep.
But I want to tell you this, that the discretion lies originally with the prosecutor. We like to say, so the charging decisions, the information, again, that's brought before a court. So if you're the judge and I'm the prosecutor, you can only rule based on the charges I give you,
Right.
and the information I give you. So once you have the charges and information, you can make a ruling, with arguments from me and evidence that I present. So it is a symbiotic relationship, but it starts with the prosecutor. You can't deflect it on judges and say, judges, it's the judges that have the discretion to release or not. It starts with the charging decision. The Safety Act has certain charges that are automatic, that they can keep a person locked up for, pre-trial. And again, I do believe also that everyone is innocent until proven guilty. So there is a purpose to look at people who are charged differently than if they're convicted.
Sure.
But by the same token, it starts there. So let's talk about, you said under the Sosnowski administration, number one, I would have to follow the law, and I can't change the law. The Safety Act is there. But what I would do is I would, number one, do a deep dive into what's working and what's not. Recently, our chief judge from Kane County said that people are being arrested on the Safety Act, being released and not coming back to court in greater numbers. It's growing and growing and growing. They're ignoring the court system. They're not coming back. And then they have to do a notice to appear, which is not an order. It's just a notice. And if they don't show up to that, then maybe they can get a warrant. And by that time, maybe 3 or 4 months have passed, and these individuals are not getting consequenced for the behavior that they need to. When we're parents, I don't know if you're a parent, I'm a parent. As a parent, it's very similar. You have an act that you don't like in your house, and you punish your child. You don't give them throw the whole book, but you put justice, you talk about it, and then you say don't do it again immediately, and then they learn.
But the Safety Act was a 10-plus year, with many different civic groups and different forms, different law enforcement officials. That was a collaborative effort, which took a long time. It wasn't, it's not something that one county kind of rest their hat on. So I guess my question is, was the law enforcement community wrong to engage in what became the Safety Act? Should there have not been a Safety Act, period?
Well, that's a really good question as well. So let me again say that under my administration, we'll follow the law. It's the Safety Act. But I would ask the governor to put a moratorium on the Safety Act, particularly the Pretrial Fairness Act, which is the catch and release one, which is causing our neighborhoods.
That's catch and release is just a phrase. That's just a that's not a. I didn't think I'd be jousting with a professor of law.
No, I love it.
At 9:16 in the morning. But that's with respect. That's not illegal. That's not legalese in the books.
No. Well, number one, it shows that you really have a good information. So I like that. So please come at me, bro.
Absolutely.
I like it. I really. I say that to my students. Come at me, bro, because I really want this. This is how we get to the answers. Okay. So you're correct. It's called the Pretrial Fairness Act.
Right.
It's the nomenclature that's used is pretty pejorative, and they call it catch and release.
Right.
Because people are caught and then released, like the incident I gave you from Elgin, where the man was stabbed to death. He was caught, released, stabbed. Now he's in custody. And I think the lives of both those individuals, the man who died and the young man who murdered this person, are changed forever in their families. But anyway, back to the Safety Act on this. It was something that was thought out, and we ask ourselves the question: what was the purpose of the Safety Act? The purpose of the Safety Act was benevolent. It had a benevolent purpose. It said that we do not tolerate racism and people who have lack of economic resources, and we don't punish them based on that. And that's a benevolent goal. But the question is it working? You know, and when you look at it, Cook County was the main culprit of racist policies, and you can look at this, that permeated the jails. A lot of young black men and women were arrested in Cook County and languished horribly in the system in Cook County jails for weeks and weeks and months because they could not afford to get out. The whole system in Cook County is different than Kane County. It's a system where they would be assigned a public defender. Sometimes the public defender wouldn't get to their clients for weeks.
But the same thing happened in Boone County. The same thing happened in Pulaski County. The same types of things.
Well, here's
Cook County being the biggest, was long known as a bastion of unfairness.
But in a lot of the laws, Curtis, that were discussed came out of Cook County.
Sure.
And they came out of Springfield with their working with Cook County. You know, I look at Kane County. That's where I'm at. Kane County is what I want to keep safe. It's what I want to do to make sure every single citizen is protected and that we're treated fairly. So calling out the benevolence of the Safety Act, where we don't want racism, we don't want privileged people to be kept in the system, is absolutely the right thing. But is the goal? Are we accomplishing that? And I submit to you, no. Okay, so to me, you know, I have a biracial family. You know, my daughter is African American, and she's been my baby. She's 28 years old. So I've dealt with these issues for my entire life. And here's how I told my children, and how I say it: when you have racism, you call it out. That's the number one thing you do. You call it out immediately. Whatever that looks like, you call it out. In my state's attorney's office, if we didn't have the Safety Act and we had a lot of black and brown people who are languishing in the jail, that wouldn't happen. I call it out. Mm-hmm. You're gonna get them out. You're gonna have something to do it. And here's what was happening before the Safety Act in Kane County: a young black man, a young Latino man, a young Caucasian, whoever that was, that could not afford to get out because a bond was too high, would go to jail. And maybe they'd sit there for a day. Maybe that's good. Maybe that's a consequence that's needed. And in that time, they would be connected with services. And importantly, because our Constitution says this, you have the right to counsel immediately, free counsel. And a lawyer would be appointed to that person. That person in Kane County would be in that jail cell immediately. And that person would be working with that individual. And if that bond was too high, that person would come back and ask another judge to lower it. And if it was still too high, the defense attorney would come up to me and say, "Hey, Andrew, as a prosecutor, let's work this case out. We have situations where we can do this, we have this and this." And sometimes you'd work that case out and the person would walk on their way and they'd be done. They'd have their consequence and they'd be done. That's the end. And it worked. Now what you have is people are released. They're not coming back, like the chief judge says. They're not coming back to court. You're noticing them. They're not coming back again. It's what I call, in a professor's words, the broken window theory.
Let people know what that is.
Okay, the broken window theory is this. In a neighborhood, they say this: when you have a broken window that goes unfixed, it's the beginning of the descent into lawlessness. Because it gives people the idea of this, and it's a social service theory, it's not mine, it goes back to the 70s. It goes back to this statement that when you see something and it's not being corrected, it gives the others around them the idea that it's okay.
Here's the reason why I think the parsing with phrases and things like that is important. I am a part of the Project Safe Aurora.
Awesome.
With It's underneath the auspices of the Kane County Health Department.
Great organization.
It is. And there's a police liaison from APD in there, amongst others.
Tremendous.
And they all indicate that crime is going down.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder, is what we're experiencing, to the extent that there is a, you're the first person I've met in Aurora who's telling me that crime is going up.
Mm-hmm.
And, I would encourage people to look at the data and statistics, but I wonder, are we dealing with people who feel like crime is going up or they're unsafe and they're extrapolating their experience to the wider Kane County? That being said, one of the things that the police officer showed us, which I never knew this before, was when a call is reported of shots fired, the amount of things that it could be as opposed to a weapon are myriad. But the police department isn't able to, unless shell casings are found, or unless they respond and they find activity or a weapon or talk to someone. And as you mentioned, people don't want to, they may call the police, but when it comes to actually talking to the cop on the scene, they're not going to do that. Is crime going up, or do we simply have people who are afraid? Which would elicit us to respond to them in different ways and let them know,
Well, those are good points, and I'll tell you this: I'm not here to spread fear.
Not saying you are.
No, and I'm not. I'm not here to spread fear and say you need a stronger law enforcement person because I'm here to tell you the truth of what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing. I'm talking to law enforcement officers from north to south, east to west in our county. I've traveled all the way from Algonquin to Aurora. I come to Aurora every single day. I'm a senior lecturer at Aurora University, so I'm here, and I live in Elgin, so I go all around and I talk to people. I also talk to real law enforcement officers, not the brass, not the chiefs or not the sheriffs or the people in charge, but I talk to people who are on the street. And they're seeing a petri dish of problems, from mental illness, which is growing, from drug abuse that's growing, from lack of resources, which are growing, and the concerns with the laws that now are being more lenient on people being released into community, and that's the perfect storm for problems. And I want to tell you something about statistics. What's happening too is if you do deflection and if you just stop somebody and let them go, those statistics might not be recorded. So you might have recorded statistics, only the people who are charged, and the charges are down. That's because on the higher end, they're not being charged with this.
But I have not read one statistic or report of a person being caught for a violent. Mind you, the story that you told us I wasn't privy to before this, but I've not seen anyone caught for a violent crime and so released. The Highland Park shooter, for example, still languishes where he should be, in jail. I haven't seen those types of things happening, luckily, thankfully.
Well, yeah, and unfortunately, Mr. Sonny Ojumami, that's the victim in the Elgin.
In the Elgin case.
Yeah, he's going to disagree. And if anybody, the readers or the listeners, I should say, would want to follow up, the defendant's name is Contreras, Mr. Contreras. It's public record, so I can say that. And the victim was Sonny, and it's a name that I can't pronounce, and my apologies, but it's like Ojaidim, something like that.
Time is 9:26. You were born and raised in Calumet City, Illinois.
Proud.
Tell me about.
Yes.
Now here's the thing about this. What of the Calumet City experience do you feel
led me here?
Not led you here, but but gives you the kind of perspective in regards to community and especially law enforcement.
Okay, well, very good. Well, I'm going to tell you this because I didn't get a chance to say this, but my students got me to run, Curtis. They were the ones that came up to me and said, "Professor, I think you should run for state's attorney." So what I did after that is I went to my father's grave. He's buried in Calumet City, where I grew up. And I went back to my neighborhood where I grew up, and I said a prayer at my father's grave and said, "Is this the right thing for me to do?" And I waited, and I didn't hear anything. And when I walked out of the cemetery, I was almost attacked by someone. So I called the police, and the police said, "Oh, it was probably just a homeless guy. Just relax. No charges." So I decided I was going to drive by my house. I drove by the house where I grew up in, and across the street we had a 7-Eleven and a Dairy Queen, and they're both boarded up. So I said, I'm going to go to my church and say a prayer. I went to my church. It's padlocked. And the school that I went to, St. Victor's School in Calumet City, is ripped down. It's torn down. That's what happened to the community. And those experiences tell me that I don't want that to come to Kane County. Whatever that is that caused those situations. And a lot of times it's government. And it's government officials turning the other way and not standing up to stuff that need to be there. I'm here for the people of Kane County. I'm here to stand up and say, we're not going to allow this to happen to our communities, black or brown, Latino, Asian, Indian, American, white, Caucasian, any groups, we're not going to let that happen. And we're going to keep our community safe, and we're going to do the best we can to administer justice fairly.
I grew up in the same kind of community. I grew up in Harvey, Illinois. That's where
yes.
I spent the
I love Harvey.
The early years of my life, which is why I wanted to, bring that up about like the perspective that you bring, because not having worn a badge before, and not having been a prosecutor, not having been a state's attorney. I've been on the outside looking in, as most people who don't have that experience have been when it comes to crime in their communities or what have you. And my experience growing up in Harvey, I feel, allowed me to see what could be potentially wrong with policing a community. And now, at this point in my life, I feel proud to work with law enforcement and talk to them and interview them in certain cases and share the things that I think do work. I look at my old community, Harvey, Illinois, which had a great heyday and then went through a tumultuous period. I go out there now, and there's springs of life coming back up. There's a lot of grass growing in places that used to be concrete. But there's so many things that went wrong in that experience, and it was the lack of resources rather than government mismanaged. Well, in the Harvey case, a lot of it had to do with government mismanagement and a lack of resources, that toxic combination. I don't think that, outside looking in, I don't think that Kane County has particularly as sharp of a problem as our Calumet, Illinois, or Calumet City, Illinois, or Harvey, Illinois. I think that we have a lack of the tangible application of resources in our community. We got a mutual ground here.
Beautiful organization.
Which does a lot for domestic violence. However, you still meet people who don't know, who don't have no idea that it exists. Which the resource is there, but it's the lack of information to people.
You
know what I mean?
Well said, Curtis.
So what I'm trying to say is that like I applaud your journey. I applaud everything you're doing. I just am concerned that people have a lack of information and quality information.
So let's
that's
change
why
that.
That's why I tried to split hairs on the catch and release thing.
Yeah, let's change that, Curtis. And I look forward to continued as your state's attorney with God's will and the work of the people in the election. to be your state's attorney to have these conversations continue. I mean, you're a wealth of knowledge. You've interviewed a lot of people, and I'd love you at my table to tell me more about this. You know, the idea is I don't have all the ideas. I'm not going to say I know everything. I want to listen and I want to change. And part of that is what I do see as I go around. There's a lot of social service agencies that people are not even aware of. Were you aware of the African American Coalition for Kane County, a beautiful organization of African American men and women who want to build up our communities? Nobody knows about it. You know, we have the Chamber of Commerce, the Quad County Chamber of Commerce, African American. Do people even know about that? Do people know about the Elgin Hispanic Network that deals with Hispanic organizations and builds up their community scholarship funds? People don't know about these organizations. We know the big ones, YWCA, sometimes YMCA,
right,
you know, which do amazing work. But like organizations like Mutual Ground or Ecker Center that does mental illness. People don't understand those resources.
They're in Elgin, right?
Yeah, they're in Elgin. But to lift up the resources and to make people understand. Now, my opponent had a budget of $10 million going in, and now it's $18 million and going north of that. You know, these, bloating a government in my mind, and again, you might disagree with this, but bloating a government is not the solving of a problem. It's taking that money and giving it to organizations that can really do real work that goes into families' houses and changes lives. That's what we want. I don't want them in the system. I don't want people in the system. I want to build up our communities, build up our neighborhoods, make them strong. Strong to the point where there is no need to do anything other than prosper.
9:33 is the time. You are listening to and watching Good Morning Aurora, the second largest city's first daily news podcast. Our guest today, is candidate for Kane County State's Attorney Andrew Sosnowski. What does healthy law enforcement look like?
Healthy law enforcement is a cooperative effort with community. So it's community policing is really, and that we're getting there. Community policing. You see a lot more. You know, I talk to my students. Most of them want to be law enforcement officers. They want to either be police officers, correctional officers, probation. Some of them now want to be lawyers, which is good. I like that. I love that. They want to be public defenders or prosecutors, and that's amazing. And I will help them get there because that's the future. And the future of law enforcement is being part of the community. You know, remember back in the day of the Chicago, I grew up in the Chicagoland area, and I think it was Jane Byrne, if you remember, she was the mayor of Chicago. And then it was Harold Washington, and Harold Washington made this huge. He said that the police officers have to live in the community that they serve. Remember that? That was the beginning of community policing.
That was a little bit before my time, but you know, so I've watched it on. I saw it on TV.
On the reruns. Yeah, well, I'm going to be 64, Curtis, so I'm an old man. But I remember Harold Washington. What a beautiful human being. And he brought community policing to America and to the Chicagoland area by saying, let's have law enforcement officers integrate into the communities. It's not like maybe you grew up in Harvey where the police officer standing in the corner looking at you like you're crazy, or where I grew up in Cal City, it was them against us. It's part of the community. It's the police officing, community policing, to me, they want to see success. They don't want to see crime. They want to see success. And if we do community policing and robust community policing to have them everywhere, well, like I've seen it, it's happening now. You see police officers breakdancing in Elgin, I know, in Aurora here. They're out there in community organizations and events. That's going to change the world.
I will give a free Good Morning Aurora mug to any of our listeners or viewers who sends me any footage of a police officer breakdancing in Aurora. You DM me that picture or that short clip of that, and I will autograph a mug and give it to you. The time is 9:30.
I can send you one of me double dutching.
9:36. Here's another thing that I wanted to bring up in regards to the journey.
Sure.
Of being a candidate for Kane County State's Attorney. You know, it's more of an opinion-based, how you feel kind of thing. Like, I've noticed that a lot of people, when you talk to them at the town hall or the gymnasium with some coffee and some donuts, they are full-throated in what they want, what they need, how they feel. when you knock on that door sometimes, on the front porch, or if the neighbors are in shot, people may hear you, say thanks. Maybe they want a little bit more information. How stark is the difference when it comes to engagement? Talking about engagement. How stark is the difference when it comes to engagement in those public forums and in those private forums? You and I talked before the microphones came on about the lack of participation in the voting process. So, how can we stimulate the masses? How, what is it? What's it going to take to get the person who's kind of shy to speak up and use their voice? What's it going to take to get the person who's looking at it and putting it? What's it going to get for that person to say, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna call the number. I'm gonna take a look at the website.
Well, that's a whole ball of yarn there. But I'll say this. People get engaged, unfortunately, when there's trauma. If people experience trauma, they're more apt to be less apathetical, and they're going to start looking. When somebody has, and when I talk to people out there, the ones that want to talk to me the most are the ones that have bad experiences with the criminal justice system, that have been arrested maybe and feeling like they were not heard. Those are the people that want to talk to me, but that's not the majority of people. That's a very small minority. And those are the ones that come to the forums. Those are the ones that have a loud voice. And I want their voices to be loud, because through loud voices and through us standing up and being effective around our communities, others are listening. And it's going to take a while. The other thing I think with the people who are disengaged is I think door knocking is great. I mean, people going, I think the mayor of Aurora had a system where he's going to people's houses and taking surveys about stuff. That's a good thing, knocking on people's doors. I had a situation where a woman the other day, I was knocking at her door. She comes and she's got a baby in her arms. And I said, what are your major concerns? And she pointed here and she said, the future of my baby. I want my community to be safe. I want to make sure that there's opportunities. I want to make sure that they grow and thrive, and the school systems support these organizations, these people. And that was a voice. She may never say that in a forum, but
Sure.
she said it to me.
Sure.
And I think if we listen and we have an ability to go place to place and listen, and truly listen, I'm not talking, and people say when it's a politician, it's like, oh my God, here he comes again. But to truly listen, like to have these conversations, Curtis. If I'm blessed to be your state's attorney, I'll come back again. I may come back weekly if you want, or maybe monthly, and just talk about these things. Have people call in and say, what do we do? This is what changes the world.
Right. I believe that from what I've seen, especially in the past 5 years, I feel like people are really trying harder. I feel like they're trying harder to get along. I feel like they're trying harder to work with the police and things like that. I feel like that change, or that kind of shift towards a brighter future, I feel like it has started. I'd like to see it. I'd really like to see it grow and continue. I think just locally here, I live on the east side. I think about my own community. I think about the west side community where I go to. And I see people caring a lot more. I say that to say that I hope that whoever's listening to this and watching this would continue to try to fill the cup, as opposed to draining it. I don't get many opportunities to wax with criminal justice professors, so this is a lot of fun. What time is it? 9:41. Holy
Can I
cow.
say one thing to your listeners too, Curtis? And I'm sorry, but I invite any of your listeners.
Tracy Duran, that doesn't count. I'm sorry. Hold on. Okay. Tracy Duran sent a Facebook of Sergeant Weaver of APD dancing with AKA Dance Studio.
Oh,
Tracy,
there you
now
go,
you know, Tracy, you are a beloved listener of our show. That doesn't count because he has a history of doing that.
Go, Tracy.
He's been doing that for a long time. He's well known for that. With respect, Tracy, I need an officer other than Sergeant Weaver of APD, who we interviewed. Great guy. I'm sorry. I apologize. Please finish that statement,
remember what I was going on there because that was so interesting. But
you were saying, I don't remember either. Time is 9:41. I'm sorry
I
about that.
I was saying, I invite your listeners.
Yes.
So any of your listeners here, Curtis, if you have something to tell me, reach out to sosnowskiforkane.com. My email is andrew@sosnowskiforkane.com.
Right.
You know, and I really want to hear from you. I want to hear what you say. And if I do, it's 1 week away from the election. So many of you voted probably already. And if you haven't, get out there and vote. This is what changes the world.
Right.
Voting changes the world. Don't sit back apathetic. And it's not all about red or blue. You know, go down the ballot and find my name. I'm on the down of the ballot because we're not the top. I'm not the president. I'm not the Congress. I'm down there at the bottom to represent you on the floor right here where we are. So look me up, find out about me, Facebook me, go on LinkedIn and find out a little bit about it. And reach out to me and tell me, you know what, I want to say this.
And you are also on Facebook as well.
Yes, I am on YouTube and
Facebook, LinkedIn,
TikTok
YouTube,
and
all the places. Speaking of how communities start falling apart, it seems a good part of it is when the industries and factories move out, the older folks pass on, and the younger set move out. It's sad that some communities can't work together to keep the community alive. No, that is a good point, and I think that that goes to a larger discussion that I think touches on your profession, mine, and housing, but that's a larger discussion of which we just don't have the time for at the moment. Couple more questions before we start to wrap up. How you feeling about the election?
You know, I feel good. You know, here's what I've done. I say, Curtis, I've put myself in the position to be able to win. You know, and people didn't think that at the beginning because I'm a Republican candidate. The county has gone bluer. I have a female incumbent, and they say, you know, what are you doing? But it's a testament to when you go and talk to people and when people meet you and talk to you that I don't have horns and a tail. You know, you begin to see that I'm just like you. I've been here for 35 years. I've been an attorney for 35 years. And I'm reaching out to people, you know, and I'm talking to people. You know, the greatest things is I walked all the parades in the summer, you know, and I would walk and sometimes I would get to a group and somebody would be waving at me and I'd be like, hi, you know, and all of a sudden they call me over and they say, I met you at this event. You know, those are the changers. And one person walked up to me and they were waving and they had a family with them and their little kids were there and she's calling me over and she's speaking in Spanish to me in Spanish, and I'm responding in Spanish. I met her at a Spanish function. That's when you know that you're making at least a connection to people. And politics is all about connecting. It's not about, you know, trying to, you know, pander to groups and say I'm this and that. It's connecting with real people, and that's what I've been trying to do. So I think through that, Curtis, I feel good. I feel I'm in a position that I can very, very much win this.
9:44 is the time. Well, I want to say thank you very much for coming onto the program. Now, you did mention two organizations that I did want to, or two, rather, Elgin Community College and
Aurora University.
there was another one in Elgin, the Ecker Center.
Yes.
That's right. So you guys have heard me mention the Ecker Center and Elgin Community College on this program before. Please keep your eyes on both of those fantastic organizations because they do a whole lot of good things in Elgin. And many of the people that we've had on our program are affiliated with and have been affiliated with both the Ecker Center and Elgin Community College. So I want to say kudos to both of those organizations. They're doing great, great stuff. Great stuff. And to all of our listeners out in Elgin, we appreciate you guys as well. The show ends on a positive note.
All right.
What is your message today for the people of Kane County?
Well, I want to use the experiences that I've gathered for the last 35 years as a legal professional. As a defense attorney, I've defended first-degree murder cases. I've prosecuted first-degree murder cases. I want to use those experiences to understand that in the midst of the criminal justice process, all sides have issues. Right. And everyone needs to be heard. So my statement to you is, if you give me the honor of being your state's attorney, I want to be your servant. I want to serve you, and I want to serve this community with all the knowledge and experiences I've had, whether it be from a parent to a professor to a legal professional to a general counsel of a national organization. I want to use all those skills to reach out to you and to serve you.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest today, once again, was Republican candidate for the Kane County State's Attorney's Office, Mr. Andrew Sosnowski, also a professor at Aurora University. Aurora University is a great school doing many great things, and we've been proud to be a supporter of AU for a really long time. That's it for Good Morning Aurora today, guys. We will return tomorrow morning with another great interview, more news, more weather, and the very best of Aurora. Be blessed. Take care of yourself and each other.
Amen.
I never saw you coming. When I'm with you, it feels like summertime. The sunshine I'm waiting for, I find it in your eyes. When we're apart, darling, I lose my mind. Counting every moment till your hands are back in mine. When I'm with you, it feels like summertime.
Being a local business in Chicago, we've always worked with community banks, but over time, those smaller banks started getting acquired by larger national footprint banks. It became time to work with Wintrust to meet our needs without having to have that big bank feel.
Wintrust understood what they wanted to accomplish, and they've increased in size 5 times over.
As we continue to grow, we're going to keep needing to borrow, so I'm sure they're going to love that.
Serving their needs. It's really the foundation of what Wintrust commercial banking is all about.